And I texted Reverend Al during the beginning of the segment, asked if we could speak to him about yesterday's memorial service, and he kindly agreed. Rev, thank you so much. Tell us what you saw yesterday at the service. Tell us how the family's feeling and how you feel the nation is doing 10 days into these protests.
Well, it was a very sad occasion for the family because this was actually the first time they saw the casket. And to see a loved one laying in the casket, though it was not a viewing on yesterday, is understandably traumatic. And then they're going to have a private ceremony in North Carolina tomorrow, and then we all meet in Houston Tuesday for the final funeral and burial. And walk in there with Eric Garner's family and other families that have gone through this reminded me how long we've been fighting this. But when I look now and see law enforcement officials taking a knee, and when I see as many white as blacks marching, I feel that we're at a moment pregnant with the possibilities of really changing policing and changing criminal justice, because I think more Americans across racial lines and economic lines get it. And what I was trying to do is give comfort to the family in my eulogy, but speak to the broader American family that has been so divided and so, in my opinion, inflamed by this present president, that they needed to understand that someone that has fought as long as I have sees hope, because I see people that were never part of this process of protest saying, no, I understand what they're saying. We need to do something about it, even if I don't agree with all the ways. All of us are against looting and violence. None of us is suggesting that's the way. But we may all have different tactics, but we have to head to the same table and have a meal that all Americans can equally eat from and not feel and not know that there's been a part of society on our necks that's limiting who we could be.
Hey, Rev, it's Willie. Good to see you this morning. Thanks for calling in. You did a beautiful job, as we all knew you would, in your eulogy yesterday. Something's really stayed with me when we talked a couple of days ago, and you said, I'm as hopeful as I've been in a long time. And you said you were hopeful because when you look out at these protests and these demonstrations in the street, you see such a broad swath of this country in terms of age, in terms of race, that people have been woken up to something in the wake of the death of George Floyd. Could you speak to that a little bit and how you turn that hope into action, how you turn this public opinion, this support we're talking about in the polls this morning, into policy change and making the country better?
We must stay together. And I think that the reason I see such hope in this is we've not had a more inflexible president. And it seems that every time he attacks, the crowds grow, the protests grow, the resolve grows. And that's when change happens, when you go up against something that seems immovable and you won't stop. And as I said in the eulogy, I remember years ago when we were doing a march, a young white female, looked like in her 20s, yelled at me, "N, go home," with the N-word. And I remember last week when I was there in Minneapolis, a young white girl, about 11 years old, tugged my suit coat jacket. And I turned around and looked, and I was braced myself to be heckled. And she looked at me and said, "No justice, no peace," with her little fist up. I knew something had changed in America. And if we could stay together, that's why Martin Luther King III and I are trying to build this national march, nonviolent, on the anniversary of his father's march on Washington. I Have a Dream in August of this year. And if you're violent, if you're looter, you're not invited. This is for those of all races that want to continue this move until policies change, until laws change, until enforcement change, where we're equally protected under the law for everybody.
Rev, Kimberly Atkins is with us and has a question for you. Kimberly.
Hi, Rev. During the eulogy yesterday, you talked about the president using the Bible as a prop. In a town hall meeting hosted by WBUR last night, we were talking to members of the community, and they say, you know what, we need to bring the churches, we need to bring people of faith, religious organizations on board, but that it's hard, that some of the younger ministers will come and be a part of the conversation and join organizers and protesters, but some of the older guard won't. We see the president signaling to white evangelicals. Rev, how do you get members of the religious community to come on board and see what you're talking about?
Well, don't forget the famous historic letter from a Birmingham jail by Dr. Martin Luther King was to white moderate ministers in the church that was telling them it wasn't time. And what he did is keep going, and some of them ended up coming along, and then some of the young white ministers just moved without them. And I think that's what we have to do as we mobilize toward August 28th, as we continue mobilizing in the church world. We've talked to many faith leaders, Black, white, Christian, Jewish. Rabbi Pasner has been talking to me and tweeting at me all the way through this process. We cannot expect faith leaders to not follow the scriptures. It is clear. It is our duty as faith leaders to care for those that are suffering. When I looked at this 75-year-old white man being brutalized by police in Buffalo, New York, my mind went, Kimberly and Joe, to the Good Samaritan, where people passed him by, walking on the side of the road, walking as he laid on the side of the road. We cannot be guilty as faith leaders of being the ones that pass by men like that 75-year-old man standing up for police reform. That's in the Bible. That has nothing to do with what I believe personally. That's in the book they preach from.
All right. Reverend Al, thank you so much for what you did yesterday, and thank you so much for talking to us today. We really appreciate it. God bless you. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.